Colette stood at the dining table staring at a stack of bills that carried her name, but never really felt like hers. Utilities, maintenance, credit cards. She'd covered them for years quietly, but that night something shifted. Her mother brushed it off. It's just a few bills. Her father doubled down, insisting Nadine sent $5,000 every month. And in that space between what was said and what was true, Colette realized she was done pretending. Before any of this turned into a standoff at the dining table, it started with something that felt almost practical. Colette took her first full-time job without a grand plan. It wasn't about passion or long-term ambition. It was about stabilizing the ground beneath her family's feet. Her parents were juggling utilities, mortgage adjustments, and the kind of unexpected fees that always seemed to arrive at the worst time. Every conversation at home carried a low current of worry. She could hear it in the way her mother mentioned due dates. She could see it in the way her father lingered over envelopes before opening them. So she told herself she would help. Just for a while. Just until the pressure eased. The first transfer felt almost heroic in its simplicity. A few clicks, a confirmation screen, and then relief. She watched the shift in their shoulders that week. The house felt lighter. Dinner conversation wasn't wrapped in tension. No one said it outright, but the gratitude was there, hovering in the background like a quiet thank you that didn't need to be spoken. That reaction mattered to her more than she expected. It felt good to be useful, to step in before things unraveled, to solve something without a dramatic scene. She convinced herself this was what adulthood looked like, seeing a need and filling it without fuss. And because the first time went smoothly, the second month felt natural, almost automatic. She didn't negotiate terms. She didn't define an end date. She didn't say, "This is temporary." She assumed everyone understood that. But assumptions have a way of hardening. By the third or fourth month, the transfer wasn't discussed at all. It simply happened. The money left her account at the same time every cycle, and the household adjusted around it. Bills were paid on schedule. Repairs were scheduled without hesitation. Groceries were purchased with a little less calculation. No one paused to ask if she was comfortable continuing. No one checked whether her own expenses had shifted. The relief that once felt shared began to feel expected. She noticed it in subtle ways. The tone of conversations changed. Instead of appreciation, there was coordination. The payment goes through on Friday, right? Instead of thank you, there was. That should cover it. The shift was so gradual that it almost escaped her. Gratitude didn't vanish in a single moment. It thinned out until it was barely visible, and she stayed quiet. Part of that silence came from pride, not hers, but theirs. She understood how hard it was for her parents to accept help from their younger daughter. So, she made it easier for them. She adjusted the logistics so the money didn't flow directly from her to them. She rewrote it in a way that softened the optics, convinced that sparing them embarrassment was an act of love. It felt considerate, mature, protective. What she didn't anticipate was how quickly a thoughtful gesture could reshape reality. Once the deposits became predictable, they stopped feeling like help. They started functioning like income. The household budget expanded around them. A repair that once would have been postponed was handled immediately. A fluctuating utility bill was no longer a crisis. The transfers were absorbed into the rhythm of the home. And because Colette never interrupted that rhythm, it became permanent. She began to feel the quiet erosion in small moments. A bonus at work didn't translate into a personal reward. Instead, it sparked a conversation about an aging appliance. A slight raise prompted discussion about overdue maintenance. Her financial growth didn't feel like growth. It felt like capacity for the household to lean further. She could not save without someone noticing. She could not hesitate without someone confirming the transfer schedule. There were no accusations, no raised voices, just a steady current of assumption. And assumption is heavy. She told herself that speaking up would embarrass them, that clarifying the arrangement would make them feel exposed. So, she chose restraint. She framed her silence as generosity. If the money prevented arguments, if it preserved their sense of stability, then maybe it was worth it. But the emotional cost began to accumulate. With every transfer, she felt a small contraction inside herself, a narrowing. What had started as breathing room for the family slowly reduced her own. She wasn't a daughter making a choice anymore. She was a mechanism keeping the system functional. There was no ceremony in that shift, no announcement that the rules had changed. Just a series of quiet confirmations that the payment would arrive as expected, and the longer it continued, the more impossible it felt to interrupt. She would think, next month I'll say something. Next cycle I'll adjust the amount, but each billing period closed before she found the right words. Each silence reinforced the pattern. Each pattern solidified the expectation. Eventually, the distinction between generosity and duty blurred. The money no longer felt like a gift. It felt pre-claimed, as if it belonged to the household before it ever touched her account. She didn't resent helping. What unsettled her was the disappearance of choice, the absence of acknowledgement, the quiet understanding that this arrangement had no expiration date. And still she said nothing, because sometimes protecting someone else's pride feels easier than protecting your own boundaries, at least at first. When Colette decided to reroute the money through Nadine's account, it didn't feel deceptive. It felt considerate. She had already sensed how fragile her parents' pride was around finances. Accepting help directly from their younger daughter carried a weight they never named out loud. So, she adjusted the flow quietly. Instead of transferring funds straight to them, she sent everything to Nadine's account first. From there, it moved into the household. The logic was simple in her mind. If the deposits appeared under Nadine's name, her parents wouldn't have to confront the idea that they depended on Colette. It would look cleaner, less humiliating, more balanced. Nadine agreed without many questions. That in itself should have meant something, but at the time, Colette didn't interrogate it. She told herself they were cooperating, that it was a small administrative shift for the sake of harmony. What she underestimated was how quickly logistics can turn into narrative. Her parents saw Nadine's name on the deposits and drew a conclusion. Not tentatively, not with curiosity, with certainty. They began speaking as though Nadine had stepped forward voluntarily, carrying the household through a difficult season. They described her as reliable, steady, responsible. At first, Colette didn't interrupt because the praise felt harmless. If anything, she thought it might strengthen Nadine's bond with them. She believed she was protecting everyone at once, her parents from embarrassment, Nadine from scrutiny. and herself from unnecessary attention. But narratives don't stay contained. Every holiday gathering became a stage. Relatives would stop by bringing small talk and dessert, and somewhere between clearing plates and pouring tea, her parents would bring it up. They would say Nadine was the backbone holding everything steady. They would describe her discipline, her work ethic, her maturity. They spoke confidently as if the evidence had been personally verified. Colette would sit there listening to stories built from transactions she had authorized. She would hear her father repeat anecdotes about Nadine's commitment. She would hear her mother describe her as a child who understood sacrifice. No one asked questions. No one checked bank records. The presence of Nadine's name on a deposit had become proof enough. Recognition began to reshape the atmosphere inside the family. It was subtle at first. The way her parents' tone softened when addressing Nadine. The way gratitude lingered in conversations directed at her. The way relatives nodded approvingly as if witnessing a model daughter in action. Meanwhile, Colette's role shifted into something quieter, more functional. Whenever a new expense surfaced, an internet upgrade, an air conditioning, repair, an unexpected maintenance call, the expectation drifted toward her. Nadine, in their minds, already carried a heavy load. So, Colette absorbed everything else. Everything else is a wide category. Electricity adjustments, technician visits, upgrades that kept the house functional. She handled them without ceremony, without applause, without public acknowledgement. It wasn't that she wanted praise. It was that the imbalance was beginning to calcify. The hierarchy inside the family reorganized itself around the myth. Nadine occupied an elevated position. She was framed as the dependable one, the steady contributor. Colette existed beneath that layer, present, useful, but uncelebrated. Her labor became background noise, and the longer it continued, the harder it became to correct. Every time Colette considered clarifying the truth, she felt the weight of what that revelation would do. It would puncture her parents' pride. It would expose Nadine's silence. It would transform holiday praise into awkward silence. So she stayed quiet. She told herself the cost of correction was higher than the cost of invisibility. But invisibility carries its own consequences. With each public compliment directed at Nadine, something shifted internally for Colette. She felt less like a daughter making thoughtful decisions, and more like a mechanism powering a system that denied her presence. Her income did not translate into identity. It translated into function. Even Nadine stopped asking whether the arrangement worked for her. That part unsettled her most. To her did not belong to her, but Nadine to her did not belong to her. But Nadine never rejected it. She never redirected the praise. She never corrected the assumption. Silence became collaboration. The mythology surrounding Nadine expanded until it felt structural. When utilities fluctuated, her parents would reassure each other that Nadine had things handled. When relatives asked how the household was managing, they would smile and say they were fortunate to have such a responsible daughter. The confidence in their voices made it feel irreversible. Colette noticed that gratitude eventually faded, even toward Nadine. Once the transfers were fully absorbed into the household's rhythm, they were no longer treated as gifts. They were treated as baseline. But the symbolic status remained. Nadine was still the reliable one. the emblem of sacrifice. Recognition had reshaped the internal hierarchy permanently. Colette began to feel the cost in more personal ways. A bonus at work would spark discussion about additional household needs. A raise would prompt conversations about expanding repairs. Her financial growth didn't alter her status. It only increased her capacity to give. Meanwhile, Nadine's image required no additional effort. The myth sustained itself. What unsettled Colette wasn't envy. It was a realization that her decision made to protect her parents' dignity had erased her agency. The silence that once felt compassionate now felt binding. The longer she allowed the narrative to stand, the more deeply it embedded itself in their understanding of reality. Correcting it would not simply adjust detail. It would unravel years of praise, reshuffle the hierarchy, and expose how little anyone had questioned the surface of things. So she continued absorbing everything else. She listened as her parents described Nadine as the backbone of the household. She watched as relatives nodded approvingly. She calculated expenses in her head while someone else received applause for stability she funded. And in that quiet space between truth and performance, Colette began to understand something difficult. When recognition is misassigned long enough, it doesn't just distort perception, it rewrites identity. About a year before she ever packed a suitcase, Colette tried something small. She didn't make an announcement. She didn't stage a speech. She simply adjusted the amount that had been leaving her account every month. It wasn't dramatic, it was measured. A slight reduction enough to give herself breathing room enough to test whether the arrangement could bend without breaking. She told herself that reasonable people would understand, that support could evolve, that contribution didn't have to mean permanence. The reaction arrived within hours. Her mother's voice carried a tone Colette recognized immediately. Not panic, but disappointment sharpened into accusation. She spoke as if an unspoken oath had been violated. Devotion, she said, was proven through constancy, and constancy meant maintaining whatever had been established first. The message wasn't about numbers. It was about continuity. When Colette explained she needed space for her own plans, her mother didn't ask what those plans were. She asked why her priorities had changed. The question hung in the air like an indictment. Families, her mother insisted, did not require explanations for loyalty. Loyalty was not negotiated. It was demonstrated quietly, repeatedly, without recalculation. Colette tried to stay grounded. She said she understood responsibility. She wasn't withdrawing care. She was adjusting structure, but every word she offered seemed to land as resistance rather than reason. Then Nadine's name entered the conversation. Her mother said, Nadine never hesitated when the family required steadiness. The comparison was deliberate, clean, efficient. It placed Colette on one side of a moral divide and Nadine on the other. One consistent, one wavering. Her father joined in that evening, and his tone was less emotional, but more final. He spoke about generations relying on small continuities, about legacy being sustained through repetition, about how removing even one steady element could destabilize the entire structure. Again, the language wasn't logistical, it was symbolic. No one asked whether the household would collapse without the full amount. No one pulled out bills or spreadsheets. Instead, the conversation turned abstract. pride, legacy, sacrifice. These words floated above the practical realities of rent and utilities. And that was what made it so difficult to respond. Because how do you counter legacy without sounding heartless? How do you defend independence without being accused of selfishness? Colette began to realize that she wasn't debating expenses. She was defending her identity. Her hesitation wasn't treated as a financial adjustment. It was framed as moral drift. Her mother asked whether she believed household responsibilities were beneath her. Her father asked whether she expected others to suffer so she could live comfortably. The phrasing was precise. It suggested that self-preservation equaled abandonment. Meanwhile, Nadine sat in the living room with her hands folded, speaking only when addressed directly. When asked if she believed the family was being harmed, she offered neutral responses, carefully balanced phrases that could be interpreted as agreement without direct accusation. It was strategic in its restraint. She didn't confirm the myth. She didn't deny it. She allowed the weight of expectation to rest entirely on Colette's shoulders. That silence protected her image perfectly. Colette felt it then, the subtle trial unfolding around her. Her character was being evaluated, her maturity questioned, her gratitude measured. The reduction in money became evidence of internal erosion. Her father said children were raised inside values, not transactions. That adulthood meant protecting elders from anxiety. That restraint in this context looked suspiciously like rejection. Each statement built a case. When Colette suggested that expectations could be recalibrated for everyone's stability, her mother accused her of repeating slogans from selfish peers. Independence, she implied, was a fashionable excuse for abandoning duty. Her father described the issue as internal erosion rather than external pressure. The implication was clear. Something inside Colette had deteriorated. The room shifted from discussion to diagnosis. Nadine waited until the tension peaked before offering a single remark. She said she hoped Colette wasn't making decisions she would regret when age closed in. It sounded gentle, thoughtful, almost protective, but underneath it was a warning. Selfish choices lead to loneliness. Boundaries lead to isolation. If Colette stepped away from constancy now, she might one day find herself without support. The elegance of that sentence unsettled her. Nadine positioned herself as forward-thinking and composed, while Colette appeared impulsive and short-sighted. No raised voice was necessary. The hierarchy was reinforced through calm suggestion. When Colette asked directly whether a boundary was cruel, Nadine replied that families did not discuss boundaries. Boundaries encouraged distance, and individuals, she added, did not exist without the families that produced them. That line stayed with Colette long after the conversation ended. If individuals did not exist without family, then independence was an illusion. Autonomy was rebellion. Financial adjustment was betrayal. The framework was airtight. Colette stopped speaking, not because she was convinced, but because she recognized the terrain. She was not being invited into negotiation. She was being positioned as the only person capable of violating tradition. Nadine's silence, her careful neutrality, allowed her to remain untouched. The myth continued to function, and Colette's identity remained on trial. She left that evening with something fractured inside her. Not rage, not even resentment, just a quiet understanding that affection in her family required performance, that love was measured by endurance, that contribution had no expiration date because expiration implied limits, and limits were interpreted as moral failure. What unsettled her most was the realization that no one had asked whether she could afford permanence. The assumption was that capacity equaled obligation, that once she had proven she could give, she was required to continue giving. Her income had become symbolic, a testament to loyalty, a demonstration of gratitude, a confirmation that the family's structure remained intact. Reducing the amount disrupted that symbolism. It wasn't the money that threatened them. It was the shift in identity. Colette understood then that if she continued, the narrative would solidify completely. She would be the mechanism, reliable, silent, unquestioning. Nadine would remain the emblem, praised, protected, elevated. And any deviation from that structure would be interpreted as moral decline. The pressure didn't come through shouting. It came through vocabulary, through legacy and pride, through sacrifice and unity, through the suggestion that independence was an imported idea rather than a natural stage of adulthood. She carried that realization quietly, because once you see that you're not arguing about money but about who you're allowed to be, everything changes. And for the first time, Colette began to ask herself a different question. Not whether she could afford to reduce her support, but whether she could afford to remain inside an identity that required her to disappear. The notice arrived in a plain white envelope, folded into thirds, the paper thinner than it should have been. Colette almost mistook it for junk mail. The utility company logo in the corner looked harmless routine. She opened it, standing at the kitchen counter, one hand still wrapped around her coffee mug. The bill was overdue. Not by much, technically. Just enough to trigger a penalty. Just enough to shift the account from manageable to delinquent. There was a late fee appended in a smaller line beneath the original amount, as if the company were embarrassed to mention it, but it was there. And below that, in careful language, a warning about further action if the balance remained unpaid. She stared at the total longer than she needed to. She knew exactly how it had happened. She had stretched herself thinner than usual that month, sent what she could, trusted that everything would land in the right place. She had assumed someone would tell her if it didn't. No one had. By the time she called the utility company, the account had already been reported. The representative's voice was even professional, almost gentle. "I'm seeing here that the account has been 30 days past due," the woman explained. "There's been a penalty assessed, and it has been reported to the credit bureaus." Colette pressed the phone closer to her ear as if proximity might soften the words. "Reported," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. That can impact your credit score." There was a small pause. After that sentence, the kind that suggests the speaker is accustomed to silence on the other end. Colette tried to keep her breathing steady. "How much of an impact?" she asked. "It varies," the representative said. "But late payments can stay on your credit report for up to 7 years. Future lenders may consider it when evaluating risk." Risk. The word lingered. Colette thanked her, wrote down the balance, the confirmation number, the timeline. The call ended with a polite script. "Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" There wasn't. When she logged into her credit monitoring account later that afternoon, the drop was already visible. Not catastrophic, but noticeable. A number she had built carefully over years had shifted downward, because of one missed payment one month where her effort had not been enough to cover the gap between intention and reality. It wasn't the penalty itself that unsettled her. It was the long tail of it. 7 years. Future lenders. Risk. For the first time, the cost felt personal in a way that wasn't abstract. It wasn't just about helping. It wasn't just about stepping in quietly. It was about her name attached to consequences she didn't fully control. A few weeks later, she found herself sitting across from Howard, the leasing agent, for an apartment she had been considering. He was methodical in a way that felt almost old-fashioned, papers stacked neatly, pen aligned with the edge of his clipboard. He flipped through her application without commentary, pausing only briefly at the credit report. "It's mostly strong," he said, tapping the page lightly. "One recent late utility payment." She nodded. It was taken care of. "I see that," he replied. "What landlords look for isn't perfection. It's predictability." Predictability. The words settled differently than risk had. It felt steadier, less accusatory. Stable income, timely payments, clear obligations. Howard continued. Boundaries around what's yours to manage. Boundaries. Colette hadn't realized how foreign the concept had become until she heard it spoken plainly. She had grown used to fluid lines, her income flowing outward, her name attached to accounts that served multiple households, her responsibilities stretching quietly to fill whatever space opened up. Howard wasn't judging her. He wasn't prying. He was simply describing a system built on clear edges. "If something isn't in your control," he added almost conversationally, "it's hard to guarantee it won't affect you." She thought about the overdue bill, about the silence that had followed it, about how she had found out, not from her parents, but from a notice in her own mailbox and a drop in her own score. Hard to guarantee. That night, she sat at her small desk and looked over her accounts. Transfers, recurring payments, automatic drafts. Each one had once felt like an act of care, a temporary bridge, a solution until things stabilized. But stability had never quite arrived. Instead, her support had become a background constant, expected, woven into the rhythm of the household she no longer lived in. When something slipped, it slipped onto her record. Autonomy, she realized, wasn't just about earning enough. It was about being able to predict the outcome of your own effort. To know that when you paid a bill, it would stay paid. To trust that your credit score reflected your decisions and not someone else's silence. She wasn't angry. Not yet. The realization unfolded slowly, like the gradual awareness that a room is colder than you thought. If she wanted a future that lenders could call predictable, she would need clearer lines, clearer agreements, perhaps even physical distance from the accounts and obligations that blurred into her own. Autonomy requires distance. The thought didn't arrive with drama. It arrived like a quiet equation balancing itself. If she continued as she had, more notices could come. More small penalties with long shadows. More conversations where strangers used words like risk to describe her. If she stepped back carefully, thoughtfully, she might reclaim something less visible but more fundamental control. She closed her laptop and sat still for a moment, listening to the hum of her own apartment. The lights were on, the utilities were current, The space was modest, but it was hers. Predictable. For the first time, she understood that distance was not abandonment. It was structure. And structure she was beginning to see was the only way to protect both her future and whatever version of support she could sustainably offer. The numbers had shifted. The lesson had settled. And the path forward, though not yet fully formed, was becoming clear. The first month after Colette stopped the recurring transfer passed without announcement. No declaration, no explanation. She had submitted her lease application, signed the documents. Howard slid across the desk and let the automatic payment lapse with a single click. She didn't mention it. At first, nothing happened. The house moved through its routines. Morning coffee, the soft scrape of chairs against tile, the television murmuring in the background. But something beneath the surface shifted, subtle as a change in air pressure. Her mother began making small comments over dinner. "Everything is getting more expensive," she said one evening, not looking at anyone in particular. "Utilities, groceries. It's hard to keep up these days." Colette nodded, passing the salt. Her father chimed in later that week while reviewing a stack of envelopes. "Strange," he muttered, tapping a bill against the table. "I thought this had already been handled." No one asked her directly. No one said her name. The sentences floated in the room like unfinished thoughts, waiting to see who would claim them. Colette kept her voice neutral. She asked about her mother's doctor appointment. She commented on the weather. She cleared her plate and washed the dishes. Upstairs, she could hear Nadine pacing more than usual. Doors closed a little harder. Her phone conversations grew sharper, the edges of her words more defined. "I've always been the one holding things together," Nadine said one afternoon, loud enough to travel down the hallway. "Some people don't understand responsibility." Colette folded laundry on her bed and said nothing. The absence of the transfer had not caused an explosion. It had created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the family's old assumptions began to wobble. Her mother started reminiscing at odd moments. "We're lucky to have daughters who understand sacrifice," she said one Sunday, eyes lingering on Nadine. "Family always comes first." Nadine smiled tight and brief. The praise felt louder now, almost strained, as if it needed reinforcement. As if saying it often enough might restore the balance that had quietly shifted. Colette noticed the way her father checked his phone more frequently, the way he recalculated numbers on the back of envelopes. There were more sighs, more unfinished sentences. Still, no one asked her directly whether the money was coming. That silence told her everything. For years, the support had flowed like an invisible current. Now that it had stopped, its absence illuminated the wiring. The lights flickered not because of drama, but because the source had changed. At dinner one night, her father said, almost casually, "It's important that everyone contributes in their own way." The words hovered. Colette met his gaze briefly, then returned to her plate. "I agree," she said. Her calm unsettled them more than argument would have. She could feel it, the expectation that she would rush in, reassure, correct the imbalance. Instead, she let the quiet stretch. Nadine's agitation sharpened into restlessness. She offered to help figure things out, spoke about budgeting, about tightening belts. Her tone carried a note of urgency that hadn't been there before. Without the recurring transfer, the story they had all relied on the steady stream, the dependable backbone had a gap in it. And in that gap, the illusion thinned. No shouting, no confrontation, just longer glances, heavier pauses, remarks that circled the truth without landing on it. Colette held her silence carefully, not as defiance, but as boundary. The house felt different now. Not broken, not yet, but aware. Money had once smoothed everything over. Without it, the surface grew textured, and everyone could feel it. The confrontation did not begin with shouting. It began with a stack of envelopes placed deliberately in the center of the dining table. Her mother stood first, flipping through the bills with a quick, irritated motion. "These are small," she said, dismissing them with the back of her hand. "Why are we even talking about this? It's nothing." Colette stayed seated. "They're overdue." "It happens," her mother replied. "Families help each other. You don't make a scene over every little thing." Her father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The restraint that had defined the past few weeks finally thinned. "The real problem," he said evenly, "is that you've decided to stop contributing. After everything we've done for you." Colette met his eyes. "I haven't stopped contributing. I stopped the recurring transfer." That transfer, he shot back, was barely covering anything. "Nadine sends $5,000 every month. 5,000. He let the number hang in the air. "You're acting like you carry this family." Her mother nodded. "Your sister has always stepped up." The word always landed harder than the accusation. Colette felt the old instinct rise, to soften, to absorb, to smooth it over. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. "I didn't want to do this," she said quietly, "but we're not going to pretend." She slid the printed bank statements across the wood. Highlighted lines, dates, amounts, month after month. Her father frowned, pulling the pages closer. "What is this?" "My transfers," Colette replied, routed through Nadine's account. At her request, the room shifted. Her mother glanced toward Nadine, who stood near the doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest. "There must be some mistake," her mother said, her voice thinner now. "There isn't," Colette answered. "The 5,000 you think Nadine sends, that's my money. It has been for years." Her father's jaw tightened. He flipped through the pages again, slower this time. The numbers did not change. "You're trying to humiliate your sister," he said finally. But the certainty had drained from his tone. "I'm correcting a story," Colette replied. "That's all." Silence expanded outward from the table. Her mother looked at Nadine again. "Is this true?" Nadine's lips parted slightly, then pressed together. She did not step forward. She did not deny it. She did not confirm it. She simply stood there, eyes fixed somewhere just above the paperwork, as if refusing to see it might make it disappear. The absence of her voice was louder than any defense. Her father cleared his throat. "Even if you sense something," he said, grasping for footing, "that doesn't change the fact that you've stopped. You need to fix this. We're behind." Colette folded her hands in front of her. "Fix what exactly?" The situation, he snapped, frustration finally breaking through. "You can't just pull away and leave us exposed." "I didn't leave you exposed," she said. "I stepped back from an arrangement that wasn't honest." Her mother shook her head. "All this over a few bills. You're tearing the family apart." "No," Colette replied, her voice steady. "The illusion is..." Her father looked down at the statements again. The evidence sat plainly between them. Dates, amounts, confirmations. There was no room left for the claim that Nadine had been sending $5,000 a month. No room for calling Colette a leash when the record showed consistent transfers in her name. The demand to fix it faltered because the premise had collapsed. For years, the story had been simple. Nadine the backbone, Colette the beneficiary. Now the numbers contradicted that narrative in black and white. Nadine still hadn't spoken. Her mother's earlier dismissal, "These are small," felt distant now. The bills on the table had not changed in size. What had changed was the context around them. Colette gathered the remaining pages into a neat stack. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," she said. "I'm here because I won't carry something that isn't true anymore." No one answered. The confrontation ended the way it began, without theatrics. Just a quiet, irreversible shift. She didn't pack in a rush. The suitcase lay open on her bed, half filled, as if it had been waiting for this moment longer than she had admitted. Colette folded her clothes carefully, work blouses, jeans, a sweater she reached for on difficult days. She moved through the room without anger. No slamming drawers, no dramatic pauses. Just the quiet rhythm of deciding what was hers. Downstairs, the house hummed with a strained normalcy. Cabinets opened and closed. The television murmured. No one came upstairs. When she zipped the suitcase shut, the sound felt definitive, but not loud. She carried it down the steps slowly, one hand steady on the railing. Nadine stood in the hallway near the front door, arms crossed. For a second, they faced each other in the narrow space. There was no apology in Colette's expression, but there was no accusation either. Nadine's eyes flickered toward the suitcase. "So that's it?" she asked, the edge in her voice. Dulled by uncertainty, Colette adjusted her grip on the handle. "It's what I need." The words were simple. Not a speech, not a defense. Their mother remained in the kitchen, back turned, stirring something that didn't need stirring. Her father sat at the dining table, staring at nothing in particular. The bills were gone, cleared away, as if tidiness could restore order. No one told her to stay. No one told her to leave. Colette walked the final steps to the door and opened it herself. The late afternoon light spilled across the threshold, warm and unremarkable. She stepped through without looking back for permission, without offering reassurance. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer. The weight she had been carrying wasn't anger. It was ambiguity. And as she rolled her suitcase down the walkway, that ambiguity loosened its grip. Her new apartment greeted her with blank walls and the faint scent of fresh paint. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, the space was quiet in a way that felt expansive rather than tense. She set the suitcase near the door and stood still. No indirect remarks, no calculated silence, no expectations hanging in the air. Just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic below. Colette inhaled slowly. For the first time in a long while, the breath reached all the way down. In her first week alone, Colette learns the quiet rituals of ownership. Brewing coffee in her own kitchen, reviewing expenses that finally begin and end with her name assembling shelves. One careful screw at a time. The phone rings. She lets it. Not out of cruelty, but preservation. Boundaries, she understands now, are a form of care. If her story feels familiar, you're welcome to share your thoughts and stay for the next chapter.